Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to our fireside chat as we wait for our guests, our panelists are coming in. And so I want to welcome all of us this evening that are in the room and those who are on YouTube Live. I want to say to you, welcome, welcome, and welcome. We look forward to an exciting evening, an evening that we will all learn from and go back to make a difference in our country. And so at this time, I'm going to be making all our panelists co-hosts so that we can begin. I want to say that I'm rather excited about the lineup of panelists. I look forward to hearing from each person. And so let me see if I'm missing anyone that's in the room. All right. So we're having our fireside conversation this evening, and we're looking at out of many one people. And we want to take a look at our history, where we're coming from since 1962 when we gained independence, where are we in 2020, and how are we looking as it relates to realizing our 2030 vision. And so I want to make welcome all our panelists that are here. I see Mr. Gabriel. I see Dr. Ingleton. I'm seeing Mrs. Dorrit Campbell, trying to find all my to make sure. And Dr. Campbell, Mrs. Campbell, you're always early. I admire you for that. Always on time when I go in a meeting that you're there. I
wonder what Dr. Campbell is drinking.
I'm drinking. Mr. Gabriel, I missed that. Go ahead.
We'd love some of what Dr. Campbell is drinking.
I'm drinking rum.
She's at the fireside enjoying her evening Appleton. All right. So I'm going to make Mrs. Atkins Tall Daly co-host if she wants to help to manage the admitting persons in the room also. Mrs. Atkins Tall Daly is our director at the Jamaica Teaching Council for Director of Corporate Services. All right, so I will leave that to them to manage. I want to see if I have all of my panelists, because we are going to go right into this very interesting fireside conversation. I'm going to now ask the panelists, each panelist, to introduce themselves as we go around the room. And I'm going to start with Mrs. Dorrit Campbell, because she was so early and she has her drink. So Mrs. Dorrit Campbell, do go ahead. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dorrit Campbell. There's no Mrs. in front or behind my name.
That's right.
And I am the Deputy Chief Education Officer in charge of schools operations and school improvement services in the Ministry of Education. I'd like to think I'm not representing that designation this evening, that I'm here as Dorrit Campbell, a thinker. And I say that as a disclaimer because some of my views may differ from the position I hold elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I now go over to Dr. Ingleton. Dr. Ingleton, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, it is a pleasure for me to be here. I would love to have some of what Miss Campbell is having, you know?
It's the same thing that Beanie Man had. I can't remember the last part, but it's the same thing.
Same
it doesn't
thing.
Look like it. All right, I'm drinking rum and
Red Bull.
Yes,
and Red Bull. Boy, I tell you, yes, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I am Tanisha Ingleton, Director, Principal, and Cell. But like Miss Campbell, I am not in that capacity of director principal tonight. I'm here as Tanisha, you know, an individual with my own views, my own controversial views, you know, just my own perspectives and the way I look at life. And I want to bring that forward today, this afternoon, and just hope that we can all share, you know, and as Miss Campbell would say, something that I got from her, I've learned from her, that views must contend. You know, we don't always have to be pulling apart. You know, things can be put on the table and they contend, and we all learn from that process. So I'm about that this afternoon, and I'm going to try to see what I can get to drink in the meantime.
Boy, I think you're onto something, Dorrit, because everybody wants some of your drink. So let's go over to Mr. Dashford Gabriel. Let's see if he has anything hiding there. Mr. Gabriel, let's see what you have there.
Thank you very much. Good evening, colleagues. I'm Jasper Gabriel, president of the Jamaica Teachers Association. Not so sure I want any of what Dorrit has, because I'm hearing a little slur in her speech.
Oh, come on, that's the internet. Blame it on the internet.
Blame it on something.
There's absolutely nothing in that drink to slur me.
Right. I'm looking forward to the discussions, and I think it was Dr. Engleton that was saying all views must contend, and I firmly believe it's when we disrupt the status quo that we actually get change. And so I look forward to the discussions and the different contributions that will be made.
All right, thank you so much. And I also want to ensure that our viewers, or those who are in the room who are not on the panel, welcome. It makes a difference to have you. And we look forward to, you know, when we get to the question and answer section, that you too will have something to share. At this time, I'm going to move over to our next participant. I am sure I saw in the room Rosemary Francis.
Yes, I'm here.
All the way in Germany. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Germany.
Hi, Rosemary.
What time is it now?
It's after 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, be on your bed, girl. I think you may need some of what I'm drinking.
From before. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Campbell. That's very good. I'd like to say it's really a pleasure to be in the presence of all of you this evening. I've heard something great. I've heard that this evening it's going to be really some great discussion, because people want to bring their own personal views into things, and the whole discussion about us moving forward and finding some solutions. Of course, finding solutions is what we in the diaspora have come together to do and to assist in this effort towards Vision 2030. I work on a wonderful team, the Parenting and Other Able Empowerment Task Force on the JD TAN, chaired by the incredible Sharnette Bailey. I'm sure most of you know her. And we're also coming here with the background of CADA, the Caribbean American Diaspora Association, the Jamaica Committee. So we are ready to discuss and also bring some ideas in and make sure that we can go forward. As an educator also in the German system and also in the American system before, I hope I can have some ideas and we can share.
Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you. I mean, our conversations so far have been so rich. Can't wait to get into some more of that. Thank you so much, Rosemary. At this time, we go to Dr. Gordon, Dr. Winsome Gordon. Do go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell Jamaica who you are.
Sit. Hello there, everyone. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I am Winsome Gordon, Chief Executive Officer of the Jamaica Teaching Council. As you probably can see in the background, I just finished the recording for another session. So I'm sorry if I look a little agitated, but it's nice to see you all. Yes. Do I have to say anything more, Mrs. Wilmot?
Clearly she waiting for you to say something else.
You'll be hearing me for a couple minutes well, so I don't think you want to hear any more from me.
Ingrid, you're muted. If you could unmute, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so Miss Maureen Dwyer, are you in the room? If so, do go ahead and let us hear a little more from you. Miss Maureen Dwyer is the CEO for the National Education Inspectorate. I'm almost sure I saw her in the room.
Yes.
Oh, you are here. What? Let's see what you're drinking. Is that important? I'm told that you have to put up your, okay. All right, now go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm not like Dorothy Campbell. I haven't started yet. I'm going to toast you all later.
All right then.
Yes.
We look forward to that.
So I'm Maureen Dwyer, CEO, Chief Inspector, National Education Inspectorate. I have an abiding interest in the subject of inequity and the unevenness of the education system. And so I really am looking forward to a rich conversation tonight. So I'll sit back and listen.
All right. Thank you so very much. I'm checking to make sure that I have not missed any of my panelists. That's in the room. If there's anyone in the room who is a panelist who I have not heard from, oh, I know who, Mrs. Seymour Hall from the Early Childhood Commission. Mrs. Seymour Hall, are we seeing her?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight, especially looking at it from an early childhood perspective. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right. Tell us a little more about yourself, Mrs. Seymour Hall, for those persons who do not know you.
Okay. So my name is Norda Seymour Hall, and I work at the Early Childhood Commission as the Director for Sector Support Services. And that basically we support the sector, we develop the sector so that we can, of course, meet all the requirements of the world that we're living in, this fast evolving world.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I'm not seeing anybody that I might have missed. Thank you so much, Mrs. Seymour Hall. And all our panelists, at this time, I'm going to be, yes. Mr. Valentine, how could I forget Mr. Valentine? I guess it's because you don't have your drink. Show us your drink. You see, that is what we use to admit the panelists.
I drink in water.
All right. Welcome, Mr. Valentine. Thank you, sir. Do go ahead.
Conrad Valentine is the name. I'm the Senior Education Officer for Business within the Technical and Vocational Unit of the Ministry of Education. And I'm looking forward to the discussions and what contribution we can make to make this discussion very fruitful and lively. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So we're looking this evening at the Jamaica we want, the 2030 vision. And for us to have an appreciation of where we are and even where we're going, we want to take a little look back. So we're going to be looking in the rear view mirror. Where are we coming from since 1962, when we gained independence, to where we are in 2020? How far have we come? And are we satisfied with where we are? And based on the path that we're on, do we see ourselves realizing the 2030 vision? So at this time, I'm going to be inviting Dr. Winsome Gordon to share with us her presentation, and then we're going to go right into a robust discussion. I look forward to what we have to hear. Before I go to Dr. Gordon, though, I might be missing Mr. Michael Sutherland. Mr. Sutherland, are you in the room? Mr. Michael Sutherland from Central Branch Primary, if you're here, sir.
I am very much here.
Oh, welcome, sir. Thank you. Do go ahead and share with us.
Well, I am Michael Sutherland, the principal of one of the best and oldest primary schools in Kingston, Central Branch. Well, primary really, but we go by the name All Age for now. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Okay. I've been to your school, and I think you're the Mr. Singer, so I'm gonna have to ask you to serenade everybody tonight. All right, thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Good to have you, sir. So now I move over to Dr. Gordon. Dr. Gordon, do go ahead at this time, and then we come right back to all the other panelists. Dr. Gordon, are you ready?
So I just ask if they're seeing your screen. Are they seeing your presentation?
Are you seeing my presentation?
Yes, Doc.
Yes. Put it on the slideshow.
Yes, Winsome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sure you're ready for a journey. Yes, and we're going to Africa. So you're going to close your eyes, and we're going into the 1700s, right back to Africa. And you see how beautiful it is. And all those wild animals, free as a bird. And so we are in the middle of the slave trade, and slaves are being captured, and slaves are being put on ships. So who are the first people we would send out? We'd send out all of the criminals. Instead of killing them as we do, we are going to put them on the slave ship. And then there are some other persons we are going to put in the slave ship. Those persons who badmouth the leadership, we just put them on the slave ship too. And those persons, when we don't have enough numbers, we are going to catch all those other ones in the woods and the little villagers, and we are going to load them onto the ship. Now, because the continent is so big, some of them are going to journey for about 1,000 miles, shackled and underfed in order to get to the shores. Some of them will die. They'll not all make it to the shore. So we get to the factories by the ocean, and the place where they store the slaves in Senegal. That's where we are now. A place called Gorée Island. And it's called the Gate of No Return. So all the slaves that were collected, we have a long band of slaves, poor souls, tired, hungry, cramped. They don't know what's going to happen to them. And they are now in Senegal waiting for the ship to come. Then what I saw in Gorée Island myself is that they had some tunnels where they would put those slaves that were bad, that gave trouble, that rebelled. And I thought most Jamaicans got there. Nevertheless, we survived it. And we waited on the ship. We waited for the ship, and we got there, got onto the ship, and arrived in Jamaica, tired, naked, nothing, on the shores, assigned to plantations. And here we are working. And then slavery abolished, and other groups arrived. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, the Arab traders, Germans, Jews, German pilgrims, Jews. You see Mr. Siaga there and sons, Gio Siaga and sons. We are all now in Jamaica, ex-slaves. And after emancipation, we lived for a while until there was independence. So open your eyes, we are at independence. And this island has been given to us by our captors, the British, who no longer want us. So they decided to leave us with the island. And all these people of different traditions, we have no long history of 3,000 years. We are just people who have been put in a place. It's like a patchwork, an assembly of people. Now, at the time of independence, there were trades in Jamaica. These trades were trades that were there to serve the community, the British community that was in Jamaica. So we're excellent shoemakers. We are bespoke tailors, and I can tell you that for a fact, our Hannah and Sons, fabulous dressmakers, because Jamaicans did not wear dresses bought and wrapped. It was not fashionable. You'd wear dresses made to fit your own body. That was the style. Carpenters, masons, wheelwrights, welders, farmers, livestock person, rearing livestock, road construction, barber and hairdressing, auto mechanic, cabinet making, straw work, cooking, housekeeping, commercial typing and shorthand, and accounting. Now, in those days, and this I'm telling you, I know, and in those days, when children left school at age 15, the parents took them to the tradesmen, and they would continue their education and become tradesmen. When we got independence, we did not absorb into the system that practice. Now, Germany had the same practice, and they absorbed it into their education system when they formalized their education. And so Jamaica lost its trades in a sense. The school system had an objective before independence, and that was to create the maids for the elite class. And they were not all white. They were black and white births, but they were still the elite class. And we were trained, I was trained to be a maid. And I must say I enjoyed the training. I knew where education was going. I could wash and cook and clean, and they taught me that in school, elementary school. And the boys did woodwork and the farming. All schools had to do farming. It was a requirement. And then we became independent and changed our education system. So 1962, when we became independent, we had a literacy rate of 30% because so many children didn't go to school. We had infant schools or basic schools. Government had a few infant schools. Then you had the basic schools that were named after the owners of the schools, Miss Dixon School, Lifeline School, the churches. We had those schools. And then we had the grammar schools, the grammar high schools, and there were fee-paying schools, so poor people couldn't send their children to those schools because you couldn't pay the fees. Then the government created the senior schools, Kingston Senior and Papine Senior Schools. The teachers' colleges, among them, Micah was the first college to be established, and the teachers' colleges were the schools for bright Black people. And the teachers' colleges were like finishing schools. And so when a girl or a boy in a village went to a teacher's college, and the boys went to Michael, so you must hear about the Michael. And they were special because they went to the teacher's college. And that was it for the Black people. So the brightest of Black people were our teachers. I like to say to people, I was taught by bright people because I was taught by the best of Black people. And then we had the College of Arts, Science and Technology, the Jamaica School of Agriculture. We had privately owned commercial schools, and of course, a Ministry of Education that came into being in the 50s. So let us come to 2020. We now have a literacy rate of 89%. We have infant and basic schools. We have primary schools, primary and junior high, high schools, community colleges. We have 44 universities operating in Jamaica. We have 2 law schools, I think. The UWI has expanded this program. We have HART, NTA, for technical and vocational education, teachers' colleges, many teachers' colleges and departments. There's e-learning for online education. There's expanded, the Ministry of Education has expanded itself. It operates 27 agencies. And of course, there's a digital landscape, the 4th Industrial Revolution. Now, what's the reality of outcomes of our schools? We have the artisans, the graduates, but if you see that nice brick building, it is a Raytown prison. And my ambition is that one day that prison will become a trade center. And I hope I live to see it. And then all those boys have been to school, but they have not come out to anything worthwhile. They're not contributing to society. And we have a lot of them, all these boys over here as well. They have been to school, but they have not achieved much. So let's move on. So the 2020 vision, 2030 vision describes the Jamaican we want. Who is the educated Jamaican? What's the profile of the educated Jamaican? A lifelong learner, and I've summarized it, it's quite long. A lifelong learner, well-rounded and agile of mind, speak an additional language, not patois, have at least minimum requirement for tertiary education, but that is still to be defined, work for his or her personal economic advancement, contribute to national development, being responsible, conscious of what is good, committed to a sustainable lifestyle, spiritually mature, tolerant of diversity, and rooted in a Jamaican personality. So we know the Jamaican we want. No, what have we been producing? I investigated the CSEC results from 2014 to 2018. And over the period of time, you will notice that children, the percentage of passes are high in the technical and vocational areas. And you'll see that for the girls, females, and you'll see that for the male. And it's very important to notice that the percentage passes are high. Now, can the present philosophy and system of education achieve the national goals of education and realize the national motto, out of many, one people? If we look at our system, we see that a number of children, a large percentage of our children is still not achieving as they should in an education system. I'm going to leave you some questions. Should we look at the socio-economic gaps? What are the debilitating behaviors in our society? For example, we're not very attractive to investors because it is common knowledge that we steal. And we only know how much we steal when we go into a country where people don't really steal. When I went to Vienna, I went to and saw that people left the newspaper on the roadside, and you take up a newspaper and put your money in a pan. And they left potatoes on the roadside, and you'd go and weigh the potato, the amount of potato you wanted, and you put the correct money in the pan and make a change. And in the evening, somebody would come and collect the pan and what is left of the potatoes. Don't try that in Jamaica. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about stealing? Indiscipline is amazing. When you go to countries in Asia, where, for example, I was somewhere in Indonesia, and I noticed that the bike men just rode as they should. That doesn't happen here. There's a whole lot of indiscipline. And of course, there's a lack of trust. There's a general lack of trust. But remember where we're coming from, Remember all the countries of Africa. Africa is not a single country. It's a continent of many countries with many cultures. And we are all coming from different parts of Africa. Some of us from the French side, the Portuguese side, the English speaking side. We are all coming from different parts of Africa. We all belong to different tribes. Now you're going to take this multitude of personalities to make them one people. Trust is something we have to build because there's a general lack of trust. It challenged me in the teaching profession. Then there's inequity. Some of it is overt. We can see the inequity, and some of it is covert. Now, we have a school system framed by age. At age 10 or 12, this is where it should be. It is not the fault of, what should I say? It's not a special situation in Jamaica. It is in plenty places in the West. It is not quite so in European countries or in the East. We have a school system framed by age. The diminishing pride of craft, I must say it is so framed by age that my grandmother told me that on her 15th birthday, the inspector came to school and asked her to leave. Now we have a date when children must leave school. It's not 15 anymore, but there's a date when they have to go. The diminishing pride of craft, we don't see a lot of practical work in this handwork in our education system as it used to be when I went to elementary school. There's a lot of handwork because you had to use your hands to make things and you had to be proud of the things that you made. Then we have a prized academic program. The grammar schools were prized. And when we got independence, we decided everybody must go to grammar school, because grammar school is where the successful people go. And so the grammar school did not serve the needs of everyone. They did not, many of them did not have good technical vocational areas. And up till today, many of them don't. We have examinations that select and reject. That's what the examinations do now. You have 5 wanting CXC, there's a space for you somewhere, and you have no CXC, and there's a space for you somewhere. The examination selects and rejects. We have muddled identity. I don't know what is a Jamaican identity yet. I'm looking for that package of culture that we pass on to our children. So, and we don't have it. And this is one of the reasons why we can be so influenced by the outside world, because our identity as Jamaicans is not strong enough. And I can say that because I look at the French. The French blocked the British from sending the Times cultural magazine to France because they felt that it was interfering with French culture. They have a culture, defined culture, and there are some things that French people just don't do. And they pass it on to their children. We have not packaged that culture. So we have a muddled identity. And therefore, all sorts of things, if boys drop their pants in America, wear them below the waist, our boys do it. Because there's nothing in the culture that said, no, we don't do things like that. Then the language confusion. We speak Patois, we speak English. In the education system, English is the language of education. Now, inadequate accountability. We are not sufficiently accountability. Out of many one people towards a sustainable Jamaica, how do we get there from this where we are now? What is it that we need to do? Madam, this is my story.
Gordon. Yes. So that was our lesson. Thank you so much, Dr. Gordon. Appreciate that. Now we have gone back. So we looked in the rearview mirror, seen through the eyes of one of our panelists, Dr. Winsome Gordon. Now we're in the driver's seat, and we're sitting at the steering wheel. But before we go forward, I want to hear from our panelists this evening. Where are we? Where do you really see us in Jamaica in 2020? What are you seeing? I want to hear your views. Again, I'm going to start with Mrs. Dorrit Campbell. Go ahead and share with us this evening. Let's look at Jamaica. Let's look at Jamaica in 2020, our education system. Where do you see us? Looking through your windscreen that's just cleaned as you drove through New Kingston, and you're seeing clearly. What are you seeing, Mrs. Campbell? Do go ahead and share. And you'll be followed by Dr. Ingleton, and then Miss Maureen Dwyer, in that order. Do go ahead.
Thank you for your stimulus, Winsome. And I'm having some internet challenges here. I'm not even sure which one of the two devices I have working now. I want to shut down one. Okay, are you still hearing me?
Yes, we are hearing
you. Loud and clear.
Are you still hearing me?
Loud and clear.
I think I've shut down the wrong one.
Yes, we are hearing you.
We're hearing you. Go ahead. We're hearing you clearly.
Yes, we're hearing you. I'm seeing you, but I'm not hearing you.
We're seeing you and hearing you. So do go ahead.
Is anybody hearing me?
Yes, yes, we are.
Something is wrong with my audio because I'm seeing your mouth moving, Ingrid, and I think you're hearing me.
Yes.
But I am not hearing you.
But speak, because we're hearing you, so speak. All right.
I'm not sure why that is, so I'm just going to go back to my phone, which never fails me yet.
All right.
Maybe you could move on to somebody else while I go back.
So Dr. Ingleton, while Mrs. Campbell is sorting out her device, let's hear your views. You're looking through screen where we are now in Jamaica, what are you seeing?
Hey, thanks so much, Ingrid. Good afternoon again, everyone. Dr. Gordon, you really took us down a road. I was listening intently, and there were moments of sadness for me, you know, seeing just where we are coming from and the gains that we have made, which could have been greater. And I'm wondering just where did we go wrong across the years? When did we make a turn that perhaps we shouldn't have? And so looking at 2020, where are we now? Speaking firstly to the gains, I think we have come a far way in terms of the expansion of our education system. You know, we're looking at different universities across the island. We're looking at the expansion of the Ministry of Education itself in terms of its agencies and divisions. But we have expanded the education system. We have opened the gate for even more of us to get access. We have changed certain things, but there are some fundamentals that have not changed, one, and there are things in the past that were very good, which we are seeing now as being deteriorating. So for example, when Dr. Gordon spoke about the way the teaching profession was elevated, you know, to that place of envy, she said that all my teachers were brilliant people. This is something that Jamaicans wanted to do. We wanted to become teachers. There was pride in the profession. And now we're seeing a shift in that. You know, we're seeing where not many of us want to step in the profession, you know, for more reason than one. I think the first one being the disregard that is afforded to the profession by the remuneration. And sometimes we say that remuneration is not a teacher problem and it is not something that teachers harp on, but we have to remember that space communicates, salary communicates. And I think that the way the profession is treated now and the road that it is going down is because of that disregard in terms of remuneration. A lot has changed in Jamaica, and the way teachers are compensated is really difficult for them to live a really great, healthy life, you know, and a life where you can buy a home, you know, as a single mother or a single father or just a single person. It is difficult now for a teacher in 2020 to buy a home without a partner. What if you don't want a partner? What if I want to be by myself? You know, it means that I have to go and borrow money from the bank and my salary can't carry it. And so we have to look at that carefully. We teach who we are. We lead who we are. If we're not healthy, if we believe that we're not properly treated, if we believe that privileges are not being afforded to us, or different things that people may be getting in other spaces are not afforded to us, if we believe that we are being disregarded and mistreated, that is who we bring into the workspace, into the classroom, in front of our children. And so we have to look back at what we are doing as a country before we lay blame of teachers. What are we doing as a country to regard the profession, right? To lift it up the way it was many, many years ago so that people can bring who they are to the classroom. And we have to remember before I stop so that Ms. Campbell can come in, who we are is defined in a lot of ways, my colleagues, by what we experience. Right? That's my perspective. Who we are is defined in a lot of ways by what we experience. So if we get mistreated, if we get disregarded, if people turn their backs on us, if we are told that, oh, you can't afford that, so you can't live here. Oh, your salary can't carry that, so you're gonna have to find another community. Oh, you have to settle for this kind of a car, right? Oh, this is all you can afford at a supermarket. We bring who we are into that working space. And no matter how much we try to deny it, that for me is what the reality is. So that's my piece, you know. Jamaica as a government, as a system can do better with the most important people that we have, our teachers. And the moment we make that shift, we will start seeing some more gains.
I am very happy, Dr. Ingleton, that I didn't put on Mr. Gabriel after you, because I'm sure you both will take over my the whole session this evening. So, so Mrs. Campbell, do go ahead. Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Dr. Ingleton.
Thank you very much for your patience. Where are we now? I think we are at that painful awareness that for the previous 40 years or so, or less than that, when we emerge from apprenticeship system into full freedom, right, or independence, we emerge with a British modeled education system that seemed only to serve the interest of the minority. And I think we are at that painful awareness now that we had not linked then our national development goals to our education goals. It seemed to me that education system was designed to help or to educate or to elicit a positive change in behavior of the minority at the expense of the majority. And as a result of that, those technical and vocational skills about which Winsome spoke earlier were seen as part of our shameful identity. Shameful in the sense that they were so associated with the apprenticeship system during that period that it reminded us painfully of our enslaved past, something that we don't like to remember, and something that we're hoping that where we are now would obliterate those memories, but something that we ought not to forget. So I think that we are now trying to carve out a system that is closely linked to our national development goals. I think we understand now that education is really that vehicle that is going to realize those development goals. And I think we are working the education system through the school system to be able to produce the kind of citizenry that is going to realize those development goals. I think we also are at a stage where at that juncture where we also recognize and accept that despite the gains we have made, somewhere along the line, we dropped the ball. And as a result of that ball dropping, what Winsome referred to as our muddled identity is the consequence that we've paid because we had not intentionally emphasized that identity, that identity that we shaped from our socio-historical past. We did not emphasize that. I think we very much tried to avoid that. And so when I went to school, and I suppose when Winsome went to school, and when perhaps just a few of us here may not have gone to school in that time, but when we went to school, lovely, dainty daffodils took precedence over the Spanish Needle by Claude McKay. 10,000 there I saw at once took precedence over Green Days by the River. And all that would have been the Caribbeanness, the Jamaicanness that we should have shaped. And where did that leave us? It left us with the muddled identity about which Winsome spoke, because when other cultures started penetrating our Caribbeanness, and so it should have. So it should have, because we are functioning in a globalized society, and naturally other cultures. But when the cultural penetration started, we did not have the strength of identity to be able to withstand it, right? We absorb and accommodate and leave a generation of children who modeled in terms of their Caribbeanness, in terms of their Jamaicanness. And then the third thing that I want to put there, and I'm going to accept responsibility for it, and I think every baby boomer ought to accept thing for it. I think we are all at a place where we recognize that we baby boomers were busily trying to make money, trying to advance our career. We forgot that it was our responsibility to teach the millennials, to teach the Generation X, which came behind us. We dropped the ball on that. And how are we suffering now? We are suffering from a social decay. We are suffering from a moral and social decay because those values of wholesomeness, the spirit of voluntarism, the whole spirit of our Jamaicanness that the baby boomers should have passed on to the millennials. We were busy trying to etch our way into and making a name for ourselves. We completely did not take our responsibility seriously of grooming the current generation who will be taking over from us. So, in summary, we are where we are with some gains in the system. And I think the best thing that has happened to us is our accepting and recognizing that the British model of educating our children no longer works for the Caribbean, that we have to carve out a unique education system that serves the interest of all and not just the 9,000 coming out of common entrance. And that we have to link our education goals to our national development goals. And the advances that our country and our Caribbean region take, our education system has to make step or keep stride with it, because it is the system, the education system, that has to bring about the change in behavior and the kinds of values and the kinds of skills and the kind of knowledge that is going to take the country forward. I think I can stop here now and allow others to come in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think it's a good point to segue to Mrs. Dwyer on, because no country can be better than its teachers. And so if our education system is lagging behind, then we ought not to be surprised when we see what is happening in the economy. So over to you, Ms. Dwyer. We look forward to hearing from you. For the persons who came in after, we are having a conversation this evening, looking back where we're coming from, where we are today in 2020, sitting in the steering wheel, at the steering wheel. That's where we are now, at the driver's seat, as we prepare to take off into 2030. And by now, most of us should be au fait with our 2030 vision. So, Ms. Dwyer, thank you. Take it from there. I'm going to head straight from Ms. Dwyer over to Rosemary. And then after Rosemary, I'm going to Mr. Jasford Gabriel. And from Mr. Gabriel, I'm going to Mrs. Seymour Hall. All right, so go like that. Mrs. Dwyer.
Good night again, everyone. I don't often get to hear Miss Campbell speak that way, and so I was totally mesmerized. So much so when you called my name, I'm not sure if I heard, you know, the passion. I was taken in with the passion. I could go to bed and say ditto and just lie down. But I want to start by telling Dr. Gordon how pleased I am that she has taken us down memory lane in that sort of a way. And in a few short slides, she has sort of summarized some of the more salient points of our education system and our evolution as a country. And it's quite pleasant to sit on a Saturday night and talk with a glass of wine, talk like that, you know. Good conversation is a scarce thing, especially during COVID here. So this is wonderful. And so Because I could say ditto to so many things, I want to just take a different angle, and I want to even speak metaphorically tonight, not as chief inspector, but as a citizen of Jamaica. Because I note, as Dr. Gordon does, that the problem of identity is really a big thing. And I know the curriculum is writers and shapers, they're doing their best to try to address that and to get it into our schools. The level of success is still questionable in some instances, but we're on the road and we're doing our best to get there. But the fact that it is there, we have written a curriculum in this way, the NSC, means that we recognize that there is a problem and that we're trying to tackle, and it's a big one, and it's been coming for a long time. And so it's going to take a joined up effort by all and sundry to really get it going and to see results and to sustain those results. Now, another missing ingredient that I would love to just put in the mix is that what I call social capital and the loss of social capital in our society. You know, the kind of savagery, the lack of discipline, the way how our humanity, we don't recognize humanity in everyone that we see. It's painful, and people say that it comes with age and so on. I don't necessarily think so, because I think the young are suffering from the same thing too. But we have to look again at social capital. And how do you build social capital? I believe it's the glue on which a society can flourish. And we the thinkers, we the architects, we the social constructors, we're going to have to really look again as to see what we are going to do to build a social capital and to grow what I call the society. When I saw the Out of Many one in the topic for the conversation tonight, I thought about immediately, I just went back to my poor high school science that I didn't do so well on. And I thought about what is a solution versus a suspension. You know, I'm a geographer, and you think about particles in some liquid, and they're all, you can see them, they're solids on their own, and we're just in this mixture. But everybody has their own structural integrity versus a solution where it's more a melting, and the liquid becomes one with the solid, and everything is, you know, it's all one. I see Jamaica more in the suspension mode when you think of the Out of Many, because there's so many cracks, there's so many crevices. We find every way to divide ourselves. It's amazing. It's whether you're brown or you're black, or Tanisha characterized it well, the car you drive, where you live, and so on, you know. And we are going to have to find a way to move us from suspension to solution. And finally, there is a little philosophical argument that I've built up on my own in recent times. I'm saying we need to build a society. And very often I see society being confused with the economy. They are not mutually exclusive, but we need to build a society. And to build a society is the job of the educator. What is a society? What is a glue? What is that thing that is going to take us from suspension to solution? We have to find those. So whereas you can maintain your structural integrity, oh, this is my personal identity and I like it, I wear scarves, at night or day I'm in my scarves. But what is that common thing that is going to make us one? Dr. Gordon rightly threw it out. There are 159 people in this room. I've been looking at the numbers, and I'm sure they have many ideas as to what we can do. The rubber has to hit the road. It has to move from the curriculum to the classroom level, to your homes, to the road we drive on, to the supermarkets we visit, to the marketplace. It has to hit the road. How is that going to happen? I am longing for the how of it. How do we build a Jamaican society? And too often I see the economy overriding this society. They must coexist, but I do believe the society has to be distinct. before we can talk about identity and out of many one people. I hope that was helpful. It's my contribution. And I say cheers to us all tonight. It's Saturday night and we're talking good talk. So let us raise our glasses, whether you're drinking water or wine, just to good conversation, to fireside.
The fireside conversation. Thank you
Yes.
so much. All
Thank
right.
you.
So I want to ask Mrs. Cook Hawthorne in the chat, is there anything that we need to take at this time before we move on to our next panelist? So I want to acknowledge the presence of Mrs. Cook Hawthorne, our senior director, one of our senior directors at the Jamaica Teaching Council. Is there anything in the chat, Mrs. Cook Hawthorne, that you want us to look at before we move on to our next panelist?
Hello, everyone, and I have been monitoring the pages on YouTube also. Just to say on YouTube, Marsha Robinson Smith is saying that it's such a shame that the teaching profession is one that is now scoffed at many, despite it being a noble profession and a sought after profession in earlier Jamaica, right? And also in the chat, in this chat here, Manly Wisdom, I contend that a part of the difficulty in achieving what we consider to be the profile of the educated Jamaican is the absence of consensus on what it means to be Jamaican. So I've just taken two. There are many comments. The conversation is so wonderful. I also got engrossed in it, right? And we'll continue with those two items.
Thank you so much. All right, so I move over now to our next panelist. Do go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. And boy, I love the excitement. I love the passion. I love all the points that have been brought up. And I see in this room tonight, even from those 159 of us that are here right now, or 150 it is right now, that there's so much that can come out of this. With the previous speaker and all the speakers that I've mentioned, so many topics. One of the things I want to bring to the table is, when I was in Jamaica and going to school, teachers were my gods, my little gods. You know, there was a big God and there were those little gods. And not only that, I aspired so much to be with a teacher. Everything I did, everything I ever thought of, everything I was motivated to do, a teacher told me I could do it. I've gone all over the world. I've represented Jamaica and Africa in front of foreign leaders. Whatever I've become, I owe that to my teachers. And you know what? It wasn't only even me. My grandmother, she had bees in Mitchelltown. And whenever honey came in, sometimes it was only one bottle. You know who got the bottle of honey? It was a gift to my teacher. So I want to really address a little bit of that, the value we place on our teachers. Yeah. And I'm not saying that the perception of what the worth of teachers are in our society in Jamaica has been so diminished. Looking at it from abroad and still knowing what's going on, hearing you guys talk. And so I know that there is frustration there, but in order to make sure that we build back the value to the contribution of our teachers to the Jamaican building of that society, it has to start coming from the top. It has to be something that we all agree, that we all see. Those situations where there are problems, where teachers are demotivated, they're not getting enough pay, they're not being compensated, they don't feel good in their own skin and in their what they're doing. It's too much of a challenge to go out there and deliver for our children and for our society because we're educating. It shouldn't just stop with our children, you know what I mean? But as educators, that we build back that passion, that determination, that, you know, Vision 2030 is not going to be achieved without our teachers. It's going to be with a higher level of our teachers feeling well, feeling good, and feeling that this profession and feeling the importance of it, because I think we've lost that along the way. And I think that is also coupled with the human rights, everything in our society, how we relate to each other, how as a citizenry we go ahead and behave with each other. I see that. I don't hear the challenges with security and stuff like that coming up as yet, but I want to address that later. I want to say that I'm sure that in Jamaica that there is representation for teachers at different levels of government and in society, but I think we need to really think as educators that we really need to be represented. There, I don't know how strong the lobby is. I'm sure someone will write in the chat, but I know that we have teachers unions and so on and so forth, but we need a seat at the table. And we need great representation in the government at all levels of decision making where that's concerned, the welfare of teachers and what they have to work with. The curriculum, like what someone says, that works itself, we can build on that and so on, but what we're working with now is something more. What we want to improve and increase is something more. As it relates to the kind of skills, the vocation, I'm sorry? Oh, as it relates to the things that are taught and how we look at vocational skills and so on. Yes, I can't agree with that more, that we need to put back the attractiveness. We need to put back how solid such are those professions are, because that's what we do here in Germany. Someone mentioned that we continued after the time, after the historical period, Germans continued with what we call the apprenticeship system. None of my children are going to university. They are learning in school and also a profession at the same time. Whether here we focus a lot on the technical professions and so on, but whatever it is. So when you look at these skills, it has to be such that we as Jamaicans can succeed in even these vocational professions being professions that we can live from. Like Dr. Ingleton said before, that we can live from it, we can survive from it, we can have a decent life from it. And so that elevation of things, we all need every profession in society. We just don't need doctors and nurses and lawyers. I mean, I would say the most important ones, we need our teachers, but we have to learn or put together all our ideas, how we're gonna build that back, how we're gonna get the value into these professions so that we can really implement programs. And I personally feel, looking at it from the outside, is that we need to get the best of all the systems as it relates to vocational professions and all that's handled in the educational system so that people can have it as a livelihood, that we need to look at all the best practices all over the world and come up with one for us that's going to work for Jamaica. And we're going to have the input not only of our education or educators, but also private sector, etc., because we really need that. Uplifting the value of these other professions. Someone mentioned about languages. For me, I'm proud of my patois. And I know that the lovely doctor at the beginning didn't necessarily, I know what she meant, and she was motivating us to say something about that. I believe that learning another language apart from English, patois, is very important. I feel that when we take pride in our dialect, that's a part of what makes us Jamaican. We have to own it. That's us. Wherever you go in the world, when I'm here in Germany and I start talking in my patois and I represent Jamaica, because that's when I feel, it's almost like when you're abroad, that's when you realize just how attractive everybody is to Jamaica and Jamaica, whatever is Jamaican. So that accent, that all of that. So I think when I was a child, my grandmother used to tell me, I know, don't talk no patois out there, you need to learn English. And I know that growing up, I used to see it as something being bad, but I've come to really embrace it. And I really want us to see that importance and learning that other language. Very, very important. For me, I have this dream that in our system in Jamaica, that we will, from the diaspora side, be able to help to establish these kinds of exchanges, that our students, they don't have to really wait until they reach a college level, that they get exposure to the rest of the world. What does it look like there in a school? Maybe a few months abroad in a school, really coordinated. They come back with all kinds of ideas. And then they also see the great things in Jamaica, because it's not only everything that's abroad that's good, you know. We have a lot of great things in Jamaica that I feel that we've got to hold on to. So that's some of the things. And as a person who is basically, I work here as an activist for human rights, I feel that we're all kinds of different people. I think a very big part of what our educators going forward have to be able to put into this curriculum in Jamaica is a greater focus on human rights, a greater focus on that we're all different in, or whatever, whoever we choose to worship, or whatever our sexualities are, etc., etc. And I think that kind of a civility of appreciating another person for who they are will help, I think, in this greater society to build that respect for our fellow man. And I think I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Binder. All right. So I think we're now going over to is Mr. Gabriel. That's you now, Mr. Gabriel. That's on, Mr. Gabriel.
Yes, right here, Ingrid.
All right, go ahead.
Very, very interesting, I must say. I must first publicly apologize to Dr. Campbell. He was far more sober than I thought she would have been, so I publicly apologize. And I must say,
it's the internet that is drunk, not me.
very interesting, just listening to the various viewpoints. And but for the most part, I share those sentiments. Thanks to Dr. Gordon for taking us through memory lane and giving us that historical perspective as far as education is concerned. Undoubtedly, since independence, we would have made some progress in education in Jamaica. But I think we would have been constrained to do so. The world has moved through different revolutions and would have modernized. And so it has always been incumbent upon us to be improving. Certainly, I believe that we have not made the kind of gains commensurate with the kind of talents that we possess. Yes, we have several Jamaicans that have done great on the national and international scenes and so on. But in terms of the majority of our Jamaicans coming out of the school system, that's where I have a serious concern. And I wholeheartedly share the point. We seem to all, we buy into the idea that no nation can rise above the level of its teachers. That being the case, it's incumbent upon us then to ensure that we invest seriously as far as retaining our best minds, getting them recruited for training and retaining them as part of the teaching force. As professionals, as teachers, we have a role to play as far as regaining the kind of respect that is required, and ensuring at all times that while we make all the sacrifices, that we display the highest levels of professionalism and so on, so that we can regain that high level of respect and command the kind of attention and treatment that we deserve. But our teachers have been working tremendously through various different circumstances over time. And the trend we are seeing now, where we are losing so many of our best minds, is not a positive trend as far as 2030 vision is concerned. Critical to building a nation, both economically and socially, must at the heart of that is retaining our best minds, our quality teachers. And so the whole idea of ensuring that our teachers are well taken care of is fundamental to this. We have to look on standard of living. We have to look on how comfortable we can make our teachers. We understand the constraints within which we operate, but certainly over time, I cannot say that the teaching profession has been made a priority and that we have done enough as far as retaining our best minds is concerned. But I wouldn't deliberate so much longer on that, because I have a main concern that I would love to share. Of course, we know that if we are going to be advanced in our education system into 2030, we have to begin at the base. We at the early childhood level, for example, we know we still have in excess of 1,000 early childhood institutions. The early childhood representative, I'm sure, is going to speak. Without a trained teacher, we know these formative years are the years for the most rapid cognitive and social and emotional development. And so it's very important that we make the necessary investments at this level so that we build a solid foundation for the education system. Of course, we have a lot of work to do at the primary level as well. But the truth is, if we look on the results coming out of the PEP exam and when it was GSAT, most recently we find we're more than 50% of our students are functioning at proficient or highly proficient, except in math and science where it's a little below average. And so while it's not perfect, the truth is coming out of the primary level, I believe if we address the inequity in terms of the placement of students at the secondary level, it would far advance our education system. I know it's a topic that we tend to shy away from. It's a topic that the well-to-dos in the society don't necessarily want to discuss. Even for many of us as middle class and upper middle class, it's not so much a burning issue to us because our kids get into some of the best schools by virtue of our connections and so on.
True.
But Ingrid, panelists, nowhere else, I believe, is the legacy of colonialism intertwined in the framework of our Jamaican society and the inequity that exists in the placement of our students at the secondary level. I joined, Bob Marley was ahead of his time, although he was talking about race. I think this philosophy that holds one set of students superior and another inferior must be totally discredited, abandoned, dismantled. Until then, we will continue to have social issues and we'll continue to have war. Let me tell you a little more in terms of what the reality is. And we tend to hide from it because we don't want to confront it, but it's affecting the majority of our Jamaicans, the vast majority. So after independence in 1962, we had 41, I think it was, grammar schools, those top traditional high schools. For students to get into those schools, you had to pass the common entrance examination. So there was no pass mark. Once the space were filled, you got in and the others had to go to primary and to junior high schools. And so placement was based on spaces were available in these schools. Let's listen to our philosophy in Jamaica coming out of independence. The first loan, education loan we got after independence, we used that loan to build 80 junior high schools. Now listen, to get into these schools, you had to fail the common entrance examination. So no provision was made to improve quality spaces because the designated spaces in the grammar schools were already taken, and so 80 schools were built, and to get in those, you had to fail the common entrance examination. If you fast track 57 years later, we still have the same 41, I think, high school, grammar schools, traditional schools across Jamaica. 40,000 students roughly now are sitting the PEP examination. And all of them are vying to get into one of these 40 elite schools across the country. But there are only 8,000 spaces. And so the math is simple. 30,000 of our students end up in schools that they didn't desire to go anyway. Ingrid, panelists, I'm principal of a traditional high school, and so I have no agendas here. But the very way that some of our colleagues operate, because we are in traditional schools, The students themselves see themselves as superior, many times the administrators, and many times even the teachers. Because data show, we know very well that there is a very close correlation between poor academic performance and poor behavior. And so when we take 200 of our students and put that are getting 0 to 20% and put them in one school and tell them to bloom where they are planted, I think it's injustice to humanity. And then you put those that are 95 to 100 in a school, and they are going to bloom as well because the soil is excellent. But you tell 0 to 20s and 20s to 30s, and all of us go to speak to these students. And we tell them, well, it's not so much where you're placed. You know, you can do well regardless of where you're placed. Just bloom where you're planted. But they are in stony ground. The Bible tells you when you plant in stony ground, it's obviously less likely that a tree will grow. If it's in good soil, it will grow. And every now and then we get a success story coming out of one of these or a few non-traditional schools. And somebody say, because I made it, you can make it too. But what about the majority, the hundreds of thousands? And the power brokers, those of us who are in the positions to trigger the change and to make the decisions, unfortunately are protecting the system. Because even if our kids don't get into one of these schools, we have the kind of links to get them there. You know what the stats is showing? And it should not be surprising to anybody at all. 100, we have about 171 high schools in Jamaica. 100 out of the 170 of these high schools, when I checked the last stats from the ranking, in 60% of, that's 100 of these schools, less than 20% of these students are passing 5 subjects or more. Have we asked ourselves what is happening to these hundreds of thousands of students in terms of their future? You would not be surprised that at the top we have 40 of these schools, the traditional schools, you know who they are. 60% or more of them are passing 5 subjects very, very easily. And so we end up with this great inequity in our system. The teachers who teach in the non-traditional schools, the administrators, have been dealt a very rough hand. At the school that I lead, whenever I take students from non-traditional schools, it becomes very uncomfortable. Because we get a pushback from sometimes some of my colleagues, some of the parents, the others who were placed at the school, because they figure that we are disrupting the nice status quo and it's not going to be so nice again, because these students are going to come with different types of attitudes and behavior. But what we find is that these students end up doing so well, passing 5 or more subjects and graduating with the rest. So my point is very simple. I believe that we should place students based on equity with grades. I have seen, for example, some non-traditional high schools with less than 70%, in some instances outperforming some of the traditional high schools. And in many cases, in the non-traditional schools, both the administrators and teachers are doing a lot more creative work, and they have to do a lot more anyway to bring their students up to an acceptable level. But you add value, but they started at such a low level that even by adding value, they are not recognized. And then we put out a ranking and we say these schools are failing schools. And even our teachers, unfortunately, are just so the system said. The teachers first try to get jobs in the traditional schools. You can't blame them. The students are far more orderly, you know, they are bright, you know, you're not so stressed. But the disappointing thing is that 80% of our students are in non-traditional. I believe, and I'm speaking from first-hand experience, a good portion of my school population passed 6 different high schools, journeying for more than an hour to get into the schools, the traditional school in Mandeville. So what's wrong with those schools and their high schools? It's a legacy of colonialism. And I asked the question at conference, and I'm asking it again, which government is going to be bold enough to say, let's do away with this inequity? I look at the stats the other day. I'm not knocking any school, but Holy Trinity is just beside Kingston College. You could just throw a stone over to Kingston College. And yet Holy Trinity cannot hardly find 15% of their students to be online. Check Kingston College, they are accounting for almost 100%. So the traditional schools get great support from parents, alumni groups, and they keep moving further and further ahead. You want to know the teachers and the administrators who are doing well and are to be recognized, get equity in the system as far as grades are concerned. What if the average coming out of PEP is 65%, for example? What if every school gets 65? I don't even think we have to fix anything for that to begin. Just place the students so we have a mixture of high performers and those who did not do so well in the same environment. Leave it to the administrators and the teachers to put their creative skills together. But at least those who are at the bottom will look around and realize that I have high performing students around me. I can get the motivation and the courage. I look in the eyes of the students when I'm telling them to bloom where they are planted. And the truth is, it's the only thing I can tell them. I don't believe in it. But what else are we going to say to them? They don't believe that they were treated fairly. They don't want to be in the school that they were placed. Every year we have students trying to transfer out of the schools, and yet we say to them, bloom where we are planted. I have a serious concern about this issue. I will need some more time, but Ingrid, we need courage to get this fixed and to get equity in placement in our education system. I take a drink and rest my case for now.
I think when I listen on this evening, I realize, Dr. Gordon, that we need to have another fireside conversation. There's no way that we can really do justice to this conversation in one sitting. And so I'm going to jump on to the next presenter, the next panelist, because we want to hear from everyone tonight. And we're almost at 8:30, and I know everybody is passionate about, what is happening to our country, because it doesn't matter how many passports or citizenship we have elsewhere, Jamaica is our home. And I think our passion tonight is the Jamaica that we all want to live. Nobody wants to necessarily go to another country or by choice. Most of us want to stay here. But when we look around and we look at our children, our children's children, what are we seeing? So while we're in the driver's seat and we need to jump forward to look at the 2030 vision, I'm going to invite our next panelist to come in at this time and share. So I'm going to move over to Mrs. Seymour Hall from early childhood. Then I go to Mr. Valentine, our TVET teacher, SEO, in the Ministry of Education in the TVET area. Then we go to our principal. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Seymour Hall at this time to go ahead, and we go in that order.
Thank you very much. I've been enjoying all of the discussions so far. When we talk about decolonizing education, we're really talking about removing those practices that are of no benefit to our society and ensuring that we incorporate what is indigenous to us, what is truly Jamaican. And in terms of the early childhood sector, we've seen curricula and learning opportunities being expanded over the years, but there's still a lot more to be done at the early childhood level. When we talk about decolonizing, then it means that we have to really emphasize the importance of integrating our students' knowledge in the classroom, their prior experiences, using storytelling, music, culturally relevant curricula, play materials that are indigenous to Jamaica and to the areas that they are from while we are teaching. We also have to look at how at that very early level, we shape the children's beliefs and attitudes for life. So how is it that we as a society feel about our hair? How do we feel about our skin color? at the early childhood level, we have to change that there. And the fact of the matter is, our teachers are a product of a system that has socialized them in a particular way, that has left them with particular psychosocial conditions that can be damaging. And we see that when the disciplinary practices are inappropriate, we see that when there are extreme versions of punishment. So even though we have an act and a regulation that speaks to the non-use of corporal punishment, we know that for many parents, for many teachers, that is still an issue. And one author spoke about the fact that there are three main challenges with our instructional practices, and I totally agree. He spoke about the relations of power. So the teacher cannot hold all the power in an early childhood classroom, or at any level of the education system for that matter. It can't be that the child is looked upon as being passive, and I know everything and I'm imparting it to you. It cannot be that, you know, we continue the overseer mentality where you should be beaten, you should be forced, and that kind of a thing. So we have to examine our own psychological condition as adults, relating to early childhood age children. What is it that we're passing on? Are we passing on the same negative beliefs about who we are and what we can attain? What is it that the children are seeing in the books that we offer them? We have a gap still as it relates to books that provide pictures that they can relate to. We've come a long way with that. There are more culturally relevant materials, but we still have a long way to go. We need more Caribbean authors at the early childhood level who can properly represent the children and their life and who they are. When we speak about learning through play, what does play mean in the Caribbean context? Is it the same thing that the Americans and the Europeans are talking about? When we teach the various theories at the Teachers College level, are we also incorporating sufficiently our own Caribbean thoughts on education and what our children should be? While Vygotsky, Montessori, and the rest of them, you know, very important for us to all learn and know, but do we also have a strong sense of our own reality and our own theories as Caribbean people? And so, you know, we have to examine our system. Is it mostly Eurocentric? 80% of the world's population is non-white, but yet still the Western philosophies dominate. And so at the early childhood level, if we don't look at decolonization as something deliberate, our children will grow up feeling as if they're second best, as if they are inferior, even without us saying it explicitly. How do we treat children from different backgrounds? How do we relate to the parents? All of that. When the children come at age 2 or 3 and they speak in a certain way, do you have a problem with the Jamaican patois still, even though our standards will emphasize the fact that you accept all children regardless of social background, regardless of how they speak? Your mother tongue is what your parents teach you at home. By 2 to 3, that's basically set. And you can't ignore a child's mother tongue. You have to see it as a part of the child. You can't measure a child's intelligence based on how well they're able to speak English. Being able to speak English has nothing to do with intelligence. It's really connected to what you are exposed to socially. And so we have to look at some of those things. I also wanted to mention the fact that, you know, one of the commendable things is that we see where most of our teachers are now utilizing Jamaican ring games, Jamaican jingles, in terms of the pretend play materials, Jamaican materials. But as I said before, we need more distinctly Jamaican and distinctly Caribbean material. in terms of our learning outcomes, when our curricula when the curriculum was revised, emphasis was placed on ensuring that the outcomes are geared to the Caribbean child. And so we've come a long way in that regard, from not having any set curricula to having curricula that modeled other places, to now having a curricula that emphasizes Caribbean learning outcomes. But we have to be deliberate in ensuring, oh God, wait a minute here. All right, sorry. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you loud and clear.
Right. Yeah, I'm on my phone because I had a little challenge with my laptop. So a call was coming in, I had to end it. Sorry about that. But just to close off by saying, so some of the learning outcomes that we emphasize wellness, we emphasize effective communication, intellectual empowerment, valuing culture, resilience, respect for self, others, and the environment. And with these, we have to be deliberate, and we have to teach teachers to be deliberate in incorporating the actual practices that will lead to children valuing their Jamaicanness, valuing their Blackness, because most of our children are Black. And we recently saw in the media where children were being turned out of school for one reason or another, based on rules that have been set up that appear to be discriminatory to Africanness. And so we have to look at that, and we have to challenge ourselves. In terms of even the practice of corporal punishment, you'll find that boys get harsher treatment. You'll find that children with darker skin get harsher treatment. And so that is why all of these discriminatory practices have to end. Corporal punishment in general, we have to ensure that we're not just enforcing, but re-educating our parents, re-educating our teachers, so that all of that can end. So, those are some of my thoughts, but we also have to look at the funding, the inequity of the funding. We have to look at the inequity between the basic and the private schools, and what that's telling our children about access to resources, access to teachers, as Mr. Gabriel raised earlier. But we have to be deliberate in teacher education, parent education, and in how we impart the curricula. And those are the main points that I had down. But I just want to end with a little quote, from let me see if I can find the name of that author. Can't remember him now, but it's a little quote that I want to end with. It says, "Education continues to be used as a tool to marginalize validity and the richness of the former colonized by negating value of the beliefs, practices, cultures, and minimizing how some benefit from learning." So while we've come a long way, let's see how we can be deliberate in changing and improving our system. Thank you.
So much, Mrs. Seymour Hall. I tell you, welcome to those who came in after to our fireside conversation. It could not be hotter in the room. You hear the passion. We see, we are looking through at this point our windscreen that's really clean, and we're seeing Jamaica the way it is. And so we have some more panelists to share with us. Do go ahead, Mr. Valentine. And yes, Mr. Valentine, you're next. Let's hear from you. What's your take? What are you seeing through your windscreen at this point in 2020?
Good evening, colleagues. I'm so glad for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. The discussions have been really, really good. As a TVET practitioner, I want to reference some of the points that have been made by some of my other colleagues. But we have encountered a shift in terms of a paradigm shift that where TVET is concerned. TVET is no longer seen as what it was. The stigma that was attached to TVET, it can't continue in that manner, because TVET is now seen as is the buzzword in education and is now seen as a vehicle for social transformation and productivity. And that's where we need to look at TVET becoming that vehicle for development in Jamaica. I note that one of my colleagues who spoke about the experiences in Germany. It says that these are some of the things that we need to ensure that is done to ensure that we drive TVET. For instance, the public-private partnership that is necessary. TVET is probably seen as very expensive to maintain, and we tend to always say that and as one of the reasons why the TVET areas are not properly maintained within the schools. Now, we find that gone are the days where a student who would not be able, that would function grammatical in the grammar setting, and Mr. Gabriel made mention of those 40 grammar schools. Gone are the days that the students who would have not been able to function in those schools could have been sent into a school to learn like a trade or not. That's not what TVET is all about now, and that's not what vocational education is about now. Vocational education has moved beyond the manual fix and has become highly mental. I mean, even in the medical profession now, animation and artificial intelligence is driving what takes place within those institutions. Accountants no longer need to do manual paperwork, but they could rely on softwares and all of those things to assist them in doing this work. So therefore TVET has transformed how we see things. So for the education system to go forward, we have made a number of strides. TVET is now in the national standards curriculum at primary levels that we introduced it. But there need to be a system, and Mr. Gabriel spoke about certain changes that need to be made to the system to fix those things. There need to be a little more equity in the availability of resources in some schools. In some schools, their TVET labs are very dilapidated. So we need to find ways to modernize certain TVET labs. We need to find ways to ensure that we give opportunities to TVET practitioners and teachers. Increase the number of scholarships that are given. We can only retain our teachers if we find ways to incentivize the system. So we need to find ways to do these things. And part of the process is to ensure that we kind of make those decisions at the policy level that would facilitate those kind of transformation. As well as we need to ensure that we get the persons who are the movers and shakers of production in Jamaica more involved in the process. I would want to see a productive sector where students they are partnering with schools and some of it is being done. But we need to increase those kind of public-private partnership to make sure that our students are benefiting. And when they leave high school, they can transition right into industry, because industry would have gone into the schools to work with the schools to ensure that those opportunities are created. We need to find ways to develop concepts like, for instance, things like would have had schools, not all the schools offering all the TVET areas as what we see as a number of schools. There are some TVET areas that some schools may not be able to offer. So my proposal is that we find a way for schools to offer TVET in terms of high dosage and low dosage. There are some areas, and we find a way to create those partnerships among schools where we tend to move students from one school to another school. That will also break down some of the social divide that exists in some schools. Mr. Gabriel made mention of Holy Trinity, right next door, Kingston College. And we see the divides there. So these are some of the things that we need to look at and find a serious system that will work those. We need to shift our thinking about regarding technical and vocational education and realize that if we are going to be more productive, if we are going to achieve our 2030 vision, then production is going to be key. Entrepreneurship, self-development, and all of those things are going to be key to the school is the best place for those transformation to take. So I must say we need to find ways to do these things, because these are all the approaches that we have to take to ensure that we attract the best minds to education, and not only attract those best minds, but we also retain those persons. So we need to find a system that creates more equity within the system. and equity, when we talk about placement, even the placement of students in our high schools speak to some level of inequity. And that is one of the reasons why some of our schools are seen as some of even our teachers are burdened because of the inequity that exists, the lack of certain moral values that has been eroded in our system and our society, and as a result, our students that are going into schools are not all of them are going in there for the right reasons. And sometimes the school is what the burden to transform all of these, not only to provide education, but to transform the social behaviors and all of that becomes a little overwhelming for our teachers. And that kind of enhances the frustration. So once the opportunity creates, they choose to leave the system. We need to make sure that they're more comfortable and they're more at peace with the job and feel proud to go to the job. And we need to go back to the days when the teachers were held in IST and the profession would have been held in IST. And these are some of the things that we need to ensure that is done, that is going to transform the areas. These are some of the things that we need to do to ensure that we elevate the profession, reduce the level of frustration, and ensure that the decision makers make decision in the best interest of our students. We can't continue to have a system where there's this severe dichotomy that exists between some schools and other schools. We need to find a system that merge that gap that exists, find a system, and that system must start with the placement of those students. It must start with the resources of those students. It must start with an attempt to get private-public partnership into the classrooms, into the schools, create the opportunities for students to go into industry to learn the skills and transform, have industries identify these talents as they come into the industry and groom them to come right into industry after leaving high school. We need to understand it's very important that our society become very much more productive. Technical and vocational education is one of the vehicles that is going to lead to this kind of productivity. And if we don't seize the opportunities that exist, whether it even be cultural opportunities, music, sports, whatever it is, look at those emerging industries that are. We are the creative industry. We have so much talent in the creative industry. So we need to find ways to create these avenues for these industries, develop these industries so that we can become more competitive in the global economy. And so that's my think on it. We need to ensure that TVET is seen as the catalyst for this kind of change and the effort. We don't only speak about what we want to see in TVET, but effort is made to resource TVET, effort is made to transform some of those dilapidated labs that are in the schools and find ways to modernize them and make these decisions, and we would definitely see the fruits of our sacrifice in our education system. Thank you very much.
Mr. Valentine. I tell you, the kind of passion and the heart that our panelists have tonight for, Jamaica and the change and what we want to see. I see your hand up, Mrs. Dorrit Campbell. I'm going to take our Mr. Sutherland right after. Mrs. Campbell, you want to go ahead at this time and share just before Mr. Sutherland comes on? Your hand has been raised for a while. Your mic is closed. You're unmute yourself. You're speaking, but I'm not hearing you. All right. So I go to Mr. Sutherland. Mr. Sutherland, do come, sir.
I was saying that I'm not sure I had my hand up. I must have been touching buttons and that went up, but I don't mind responding after Mr. Sutherland.
Okay. Thank you much. Go ahead, Mr. Sutherland.
I'm here and I've been listening and I'm wondering if I have anything else to contribute. No, because of the wealth of information I just received. But since I'm here to contribute, I will do so nonetheless. A few years ago, before I went to Central Branch, I was of the opinion that Jamaica was heading towards the 2030 vision, the respect for country and self. And because I was as one of those traditional high schools that many girls wanted to attend. Then when I went to Central Branch, I realized that it was a totally different Jamaica. People who believed that if you are not light-skinned, then you are nobody. People who believe that if your hair isn't long and straight, then you would not be recognized. And there is where I realized that the school has had and still has a lot of work to do. And I've realized too that the school is the catalyst of change in our country. We are the ones, the teachers are the ones who are responsible for selling the culture, selling what we want to see in our Jamaican society. Because as was mentioned before, we are really, really looked up to. Our primary school children think the world of us. And therefore, if we give them the thought of, or well, not give it to them really, but because I don't believe in putting in, because we are supposed to be pulling out from them. But if we just lay the foundation for them, we will be closer to our vision 2030. We are 10 years away from that vision, and we have a lot of work to do, a whole lot of work to do. You know, we still have to be engaged in this whole thing about teaching self-love, self-identity. All of this is very, very vital, and we have a long way to go. We have a very long way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sutherland. I'm going to go now to Dr. Gordon. We have heard from Dr. Gordon. She started with her presentation, taking us all the way back. And so, Dr. Gordon, over to you now as we look at where we are now. And then I'm going to go back to the panelists as we try to draw this to a close, our fireside conversation. There's so much to talk about. There's so much more. But more than that, we want to, at the end of this, walk away with what can we do? Because the 2030 vision can be realized, but it won't take talk. It won't take persons to sit back and be afraid to be heard, be afraid to be in the minority. It will take action, it will take commitment, but it can happen. Dr. Gordon, over to you.
Thank you very much. The interventions have been interesting. Yes, where do we go from here? And we need to move. And it really, we don't have to stop the system, to change it. We need to change the way we do things. The early childhood education level is that level at which a system introduces a change, major changes. And I look at école maternelle in France, it's compulsory. And that is where France creates the French child. And the child is from Jamaica and goes to école maternelle. The child becomes a French child. And in Jamaica, we have not packaged that program for the early childhood to get our children to become Jamaicans, the Jamaicans we want. We have a tradition where everybody thinks that a child is reading at 3 years old. It's so nice to have the children reading at 3 years old, but that's not the purpose of early childhood education. It's not there to teach them to read and write. It is there to teach them to become good people. We experimented with 28 inner city schools with the English language, my daughter and I. And those children learned to speak English like anybody else. And if the education system is conducted in English, then at the early childhood level, when children learn languages, you can teach them Chinese at that level. When children learn languages, that's where you teach them the English language. And that is where you level the playing field. And that is where you give them upward social mobility. And we have not been focusing on that. We have been we have just moved the tradition into the reading and the writing, because people say that, in fact, even some primary schools won't take children who cannot read and write in grade 1, which is something that we should not allow to happen. The early childhood program is there to teach them the values. Children, we are dishonest in a lot of ways. Teach them to be honest. Teach them to be tidy. Teach them to be disciplined, to follow rules. Spend time on programs like that. It does not mean that they won't learn a few words. It depends on the program that we give them. And the program we gave them, at the end of the couple of weeks, they knew a few words, but the focus was not on that. The focus was on, you learn a language, you learn to obey the rules of your school. You know that there's something called discipline, there's an expectation. And one teacher, one principal said to me, you know, Dr. G, when these children speak English, they behave differently, because they think that they're supposed to be nice when they speak English. No, unfortunately, that is a perception of English. But at the same time, it's the language of, it's the official language, and it's the language of the education system. And so if we deprive them at that age, we already set the stratas in the early childhood program, the social stratas. The other concern, and I am very happy to hear about the vocational areas, because we did build the vocational areas in the 70s. And I must tell Mr. Gabriel, by the way, we got those junior secondary schools because the World Bank would not fund primary schools, elementary schools. They told Mr. Edwin Allen that they will not fund elementary schools. It was a rule of the bank. And so they created something called junior secondary schools, so we could get some money from the World Bank. Well, when Mavis Gilmore took over, she personally negotiated with the World Bank and got them to finance primary education. And not only that, got them to change their policies towards primary education. So Jamaica has gone through processes of changing education system according to the availability of the resources to build the institutions that we want. Now we think we have grown up and we are a bit more independent. And so we can look at our education system and make the changes we want. Nevertheless, to really put vocational education where it ought to be, we have to borrow the money, because vocational education is so expensive. But at the end of the day, that's where children succeed. When you look at the CSEC results, that's where they perform very well. And when you look at the program that we give to them, let's take mathematics. This is my favorite one. A girl who can make a good pudding and it tastes good and it has the right quality knows the mathematics for the pudding. A boy who can build a good chair and you can sit in it and it doesn't fall down and it is designed, he knows the mathematics for building the chair. But we are going to fail him because he doesn't know quadratic equation, which is part of the CSEC syllabus. And my concern is, why does he have to know quadratic equation? I did it and I only used it when I had to do correlations manually. So, you know, at the end of the day, we have to look at the package, the education package that we are giving our children. And in fact, we are failing them in areas that they don't need. And in the areas in which they succeed, they're not the areas in which we put a lot of investment. So right now, at this point in Jamaica, we need to invest in our technical and vocational education programs. Do what we did in 1973. Borrow the money and make the investment in the schools, in the programs. I think by now we have finished paying back the bank. But those instruments, when you go to a school and see a drill press bought from 1973, which I've done, I've gone to Kingston High and know the machinery. And when I see it, it can't help our children. They turn off the technical and vocational education. And in our primary schools, we have removed, I don't know if it was done officially, but when I go to a primary school now, I don't see an afternoon when children produce, when children are productive. I go to China and I go to Japan and I go to Indonesia, and the children are engaged in practical work all along from infant school right up through the school system. In fact, in one of the schools in China, children were producing pillboxes that companies were using. So, you know, in Jamaica, for some reason, and I think it has to do with the exam system, we have moved ourselves away from children using their hands to do things. And so what happens to a farmer? He takes his son, puts his son in school, and the boy comes out of high school now, not wanting to do anything on the farm. Whereas if he had stayed with his father, he would have followed his father to the farm and he would have been a farmer. So the school has to look at what it is doing. Is it de-skilling the society? It's a question we need to ask. And so, Mrs. Wilmot, I love this little fireside argument, discussion, conversation, and I would like us to have it again, because exploration of ideas is very important at this stage. Jamaican educators are far more educated now, or Jamaica has far more well-educated persons in the education system than we had in 1960s. So our teachers now have first English. You know, we are more educated. We can now investigate our system. It doesn't need to cost us a lot of money to change. There are some things in our curriculum we need to change. The maths program is not so much that our children are failing the program. It is the program is beyond them. And there's no need. When I take a Canadian maths program at primary level and I look at what Mr. Sutherland has for his program to teach his little children, there's a vast difference. Because they're focusing at the primary level, the Canadian program is focusing on the 4 functions of maths. We have moved our primary education curriculum to a point where some secondary school children cannot even cope with it. At any rate, some of the teachers cannot even teach it, you know? So we have to look at what we are doing, what we have done with the education system to make us look good. Because when you show the Jamaican curriculum in America, for example, we show off, or when our children go to America, they're so way ahead of the American children because they can do so much more, but the American economy is stronger than ours. So, you know, we have to sit down and reflect.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Gordon. Boy, there's just so much to say, and I'm going to go right back now where I started with excuse me, Mrs. Campbell. We're going to look now as we go forward. As we have to wrap up, yes. So I
am not Mrs. Campbell. I've been trying to tell you that from.
You know, I think, you know, let's blame it on the wine.
I didn't marry you off, so you have changed.
Okay. I was listening and trying to kind of find a center based on where Winsome started at the very beginning. Trying to find a center, the nucleus of the conversation here. And I just want to respond to some of the sentiments which have been expressed. And I'm going to, in some respects, my views may differ from some of those expressed. And I'm going to start with the ongoing conversation and never-ending conversation with regard to the Jamaican Creole versus the English language. And I'm simply going to say this. The Jamaican Creole is a language carved out of our historicity. I don't even know if that word exists or that I just created. But it's a language carved out of our historicity. And it, in a sense, partially defines what we've gone through, what we've experienced. And it presents for us our resilience to have been able to communicate when we weren't supposed to, when we should not have a voice. It represents that for me, the voice of our enslaved ancestors who demonstrated that kind of resilience, right? That they created a language that allowed them to communicate when other forces were shutting down their voice. But having said that, however, I accept, and I think we ought to be at the place in 2030 where we accept that the universal language in the global community is the English language. And therefore, whether our students like it or not, whether we find it very difficult to teach them, whether we're going to teach them as a first language or a second language, the simple fact is, if they are going to be surviving in this global community, I guarantee you the Jamaican Creole will never be that universal language. I know Jamaicans are excellent creators and we take the world by storm, but I think this one is a little bit bigger than us. So I don't see in the foreseeable future, I don't see in the undergrowth, the Jamaican Creole becoming the language of the global community. So our students will have to learn the English language. The debate about whether it should be taught as a second language is neither here nor there. Having been a teacher of English myself, I taught it as a second language to students who came out of Creole speaking environment and needed to learn the English language. So that's my take on the ongoing, the never-ending conversation with regard to the Jamaican Creole and the English language. The two can contend, just like our views are contending. Then the whole issue of how we value or undervalue our teachers, regrettably, unfortunately, is predicated, the measure on which it is predicated is on money. And I think that we're far better than that. I think teachers are invaluable. I think the profession is invaluable. And I say categorically, and I say unequivocally, and I also say unapologetically, our teachers deserved to be paid more. But I'm also saying, and I think Mr. Gabriel was intimating this, but being the representative of the teachers, he couldn't come out and say it the way I'm saying it. I am also saying, when you start defining yourself and your value by how much you earn, something is wrong with that. Something is wrong with that. And I think that we ought to now lift that profession, Winsome, and it's part of your responsibility to do that. Lift the profession out of that kind of narrow prism. Because I am not being paid at a certain level, I am not valued, right? Start by showing, and you are doing it now, because I tell you, if any parent never did value you before, the April 14, when we had to shut down brick wall schools, you see what happened to parents in the world. Some went down on their knees, right? And now they recognize how important that teacher, as the facilitator, the midwife, who helps children to give birth to new knowledge, how important you are. So your value is not tied to your pay. And you have to raise yourself above that. And that is not discounting that you should be paid better. I think you should be paid better. And I think everybody agrees that you should be paid better. But you start the narrative of how valuable you are because every other professional needs you to become the professional they are. You start the narrative of how valuable you are and how you should be valued by the way you behave in the profession. By the way you behave in the profession. And that, I think, was where Mr. Gabriel was going. You undervalue yourself as a teacher, and in a sense, you undervalue the entire profession. And then now, Winsome has the responsibilities to bring the quasi-profession into a full-fledged profession with the licensing, with the registration, and what else, Winsome? With the continuous professional development to make it the full profession with the value that it's supposed to have unto it. And then the third thing I want to say is that inequity in school performance and student performance will be with us forever. Why is it going to be so? Human beings by nature are competitive. And the truth be told, we all are not functioning at the same level in terms of our intellectual capacity, and that impacts our academic performance. So we will always have students outperforming others. We will always have schools outperforming others. What I would love to see, and I think what we'd all love to see, when you put everybody on that bell curve, that right there bunch up in the middle with the majority would be doing satisfactorily or doing well or doing good. And those even, the few at the left there are still satisfactory. We can still have that, but we will still have the pockets of excellence right at the zenith there or on the right side, the far right side of the bell curve, because that's how we are. We are not all blessed with the same kind of capabilities. And even if we were, there will be some of us who will push ahead because it is in our nature. We are wired to be competitive, and some of us will forge ahead in the same way some schools will forge ahead. And I would like to say that this perception about non-traditional high schools that most of our parents harbor, I think it's time we let go of it. Because the data, and I'm not going to single out any school, and Mr. Gabriel also alluded to this. The data shows that some of the non-traditional high schools that we run past to get into some of the traditional high schools are performing at the standard at the 40 traditional high schools that we have. And I have seen parents whose children were placed into those performing non-traditional high school, arguing their way out of it to go into a traditional high school, not performing at the level at which they want to live. So that, in my estimation, is also coming out of our plantation legacy, our plantation mentality. Right? So that perception needs to go away, school as school. And we should stop layering the schools, because some non-traditional high schools are performing, some traditional high schools are living on reputation, but the data doesn't support that reputation. I hope nobody no vexed me this evening, but I saw me see. The next thing that I am going to suggest,
not sure what happened there. We seem to
I think Winsome just called me. Okay. Winsome, I'm using my phone, so.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. The next thing that, well, where do we go from here? I'd say that all of us need to take our shared philosophy seriously and our shared vision seriously. And we need to act upon it. If we believe that every child can learn, then we must understand how each child learns, and we must be able to teach the way each child learns. And we understand and we accept that they will not learn at the same pace, and they will not learn the same things at the same time, at the same pace. And we have to design our curriculum and our assessment to take take that into consideration, or to respond to that. And where do we go from here? I think we must stop testing so often. I think we test too much. I think we've used our students as too much guinea pigs. We don't always have to be testing. We test too much. And I think we need to look back again at our assessment, because sometimes when I do the comparative analysis, I think Jamaica makes it very hard, or harder, for our students to learn. I think we make learning harder for our students than anywhere in the world. And there is coming out shortly a colleague of mine who is doing a study on how testing and comparing with other countries. And the findings that he's seeing there is that our tests, our assessments are coming out harder than they are in other developing countries. And then I think, therefore, we should intentionally design our curriculum that can intentionally indoctrinate our students in the values and the attitudes that we want. And I think once we get the values and the attitudes right, we create the fertile soil on which learning academics or learning other disciplines will take place. And I also feel that we should not be promoting TVET only all the way. In my estimation, we should strike the balance between TVET and other traditional disciplines, because given our global context and given our national development goals, we need both. We need a balance of both the traditional and the TVET disciplines. And I think our students must be so culturized and must be so groomed and must be so educated to appreciate both and not go to one extreme. And I think if we're not careful in our desire, in our desperate desire to place the value that TVET should have had from the very beginning, we may go to the extreme, to the detriment of traditional disciplines that our students need. I think we need to strike a balance on both. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. We definitely will have, I'm going to leave it on Dorrit Campbell to ensure that for our next session, we all get a bottle of wine, because we have to meet again. There's just so much to say, so little time. I'm going to ask all our panelists at this time, we're going to move on to a 1 minute. We're at COVID, where we've seen the paradigm shift in education. We are looking at the 2030 vision. At every juncture, we look at a SWOT analysis. What is our strength? What's our weakness? What I want us to know, look at what are the opportunities as we forge our way into 2030. 10 years from now, we have a vision. Can it be realized? Where are we and how do we see ourselves at this point where you are? I'm going to ask each panelist to just give me 1 minute. I know Dr. Gordon wants to respond to a point. So I'm going to allow you, Dr. Gordon, to do it in 1 minute, and then I'm going to go to my panelists from Dr. Ingleton, and we come down to all the panelists. Thank you so very much for sharing. Go ahead, Dr. Campbell. Dr. Gordon, do go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just 1 minute. You know, school is not a place that is supposed to fail children. And somewhere we have it in our minds that people must fail, some must fail, and some must pass. School is a place where we are supposed to identify the potential of children. And when we identify the potential, we grow the potential. And so we are different. All of us different, have a garden, and even one plant has different flowers. We're all different. But in school, the idea is to identify what is it the child can do. What is it the child is able to do, and work with that child, not to set a standard that says every child must do this, because it doesn't work. We are not made like that. God didn't standardize us. And so the school is working on a system of standardization, and that is a challenge. And so some children get kicked out. It is not equitable, because some children just can't work on the scale. The very child that fails geography is the very child that succeeds in music or dance.
So he learns that.
So let's find where children succeed and encourage them in the areas in which they succeed. So now when they leave school, every child will leave with a certificate of success, because they'll be given that certificate in the area in which they are excellent. The last thing I want to say is that the digital age now has provided us some tools that we need to use, because I don't like the testing. Denmark does not have a national test, and I don't see anything wrong with the Danes. What I would like to see now is that we use the digital space to allow the children, they can now do the same test over and over until they get 100. And the teacher doesn't have to worry about marking, because the system is marking the paper. So if I get 10 this time, Out of 100, I do the test again, I get 20. And so tests can now be used as teaching tools. You just keep doing the test until you get full marks. We need to change the perception of what school is supposed to do.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. All right, I'm going to go to Dr. Ingleton. Do go ahead, Dr. Ingleton. We're, I know, as I said, there's so much to say. Do go.
You can clap me. You can clap me. I try to be 1 minute. Now, I'm just going to wrap up on my point that I advanced earlier and just weigh in quickly on some others. Now, Nehru, a former Prime Minister of India, he once said that the fundamental rule in human life is that if the approach is good, the response is good, right? Now, from that, I'm saying we need to change the way we approach our educators. I've been hearing this narrative for a long while about teachers changing themselves or teachers seeing value in themselves. I don't know that Jamaican teachers don't see value in themselves. The very reason why they leave is because they see value in themselves. They see where they can do better. They see where they can be more. It is now up to us as the movers and shakers, as those who may have the ear of the government, and to speak powerfully about changing the way we approach our educators. We cannot even begin to recruit the very best and the brightest. We have no platform for recruitment. So we're not even going to talk about retention. Let's talk about recruitment, those who are supposed to be coming in. If we look at the teachers' colleges and look at perhaps the level of students who are applying in, we're not seeing perhaps the very best because they are deciding that I can't stay here. I can't survive in this profession. I have to find another way out. So if we're going to change the education system, we're going to have to start with the teachers. And we can't keep telling them to value yourselves. They value themselves. We need to change the approach. We need to show them that we value them so that they can choose to come in and that they can choose to stay. So that's my little bit. It was a great time being with you. I love how the views contended. And Dr. Gordon and Miss Campbell and Miss Dwyer, it would be lovely. And Mr. Gabriel and Sutherland and all the EOs who spoke. And my friend there from Germany, it's about 4 o'clock now. You should be sleeping.
Is she still awake?
It would be lovely if we can meet again. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Definitely. Thank you so very much. I move over now. Yes, thank you, Dr. Ingleton. I move over to Mr. Gabriel. We're taking it down. I am not sure if Rosemary's still up. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. It's great. Very, very interesting. I know at some point, whatever Dorothy's drinking would have started to work.
I was drinking chocolate milk. Sorry to disappoint you.
A few takeaways, though, very, very interesting. The balance, when we talk about TVET, I love the points that were raised because skill area is where we need, the world has gone that way and we can't be left behind. And so even while we talk about balance, it is still very lopsided. And we have not given the kind of support to the technical and vocational areas, and so that kind of balance is important. We need to support that area. And some of the same students that I'm having a concern about, they are so gifted in these areas, and we need to create more opportunities for them. Dr. Ingleton couldn't have said it better in relation to value. The truth is, we can't separate value from economics, no matter how we look at it. And the fact is, beginning right at where she started in terms of recruiting, people are not even looking to this profession because they also want to make sure that at least their basic needs can be met. And our teachers value themselves to the extent that they will want to go work in first world countries that is so demanding, they back themselves, they figure they can get the job done. And so that we now have to determine the extent to which we are going to be able to give the kind of support to retain. And then the third point, the one I spent so much time talking, and I'm really concerned when I hear Dr. Campbell share those few points, because given where the level that she's serving, and all of us are in a position where we can effect change, leaders must set the parameters within which we can give all our students as the best possible opportunity to succeed. I went to a high school where there was no, you just had feeder schools. And yet we had strong competition within the school to the extent that we have the same kind of mix that I'm talking about, that it still continues to be a top performing school.
But that's exactly what I'm saying, Mr. Gabriel.
I hope we're not suggesting that we are supporting a system where we are taking zeros to 20 and 20s to 30.
No. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that you can still have the bell curve.
Let's have another talk.
No, I have to clarify this. Because I think you have misunderstood. I'm saying that you will always have the bell curve. It's just that those to the far left should still be satisfactory, should still be performing well, but you will still have those in the far right outdoing the others, because by nature, some of us will outdo others.
But we have to set the parameters first before that bell curve plays out to give everybody a fair chance.
We have set the parameters. I think we have set the parameters. I think we have set the parameters, and that is why the NEI, in terms of its inspection, gives us the kind of data that will help us to move those who are still unsatisfactory up to satisfaction.
Dr. Campbell,
everybody will not be at excellent, and I would love to have everybody at exceptional, right?
Why do the traditional schools get the exceptional
ahead of others? But everybody can be good. That's
why
pretty much what I'm saying.
Why does the traditional schools get the exceptional
I'm going to ask Mr. Gabriel. Mr. Gabriel finish his point. Go ahead, Mr. Gabriel.
Yeah, man, I was asking Dr.
I'm sorry I had to interject, but I think you misinterpreted what I said, and I would not like for you to perpetuate that misinterpretation.
Not at all. Based on your explanation, I interpreted exactly what you said. A bell curve will exist even under the system I'm proposing. Equity in terms of placement. We still have the bell curve, but what we are creating is an environment now that in terms of the self-esteem and the destruction of our social values, that at least we are creating a level kind of playing field to the best of our ability. And so moving forward, what COVID has done is to provide COVID has provided some great opportunities in terms of teacher training, learning more skills, in terms of the digital platform. And so our education system, I think, will be the better for this, because we have been forced now in terms of embracing new modalities and new ways of doing things. You know, and so we have to approach with open minds, and we look forward to improving our system as we go forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gabriel. I go over to, I think we need to definitely have Mr. Gabriel and Dorrit back to continue that conversation.
No, but I mean, there wouldn't be much in terms here, because we're usually on the same page. We just say it differently.
Right.
The drink is the difference tonight.
Chair, no bell curve. No bell curve. Bell curve only occurs when you put everybody on a scale. So bell curve is out of date. There's no bell curve now.
All right. we will definitely have to come back with this conversation, but I'll go to Ms. Dwyer. Ms. Dwyer, over to you. You have your 1 minute. Let's hear from you. We're now moving on to the driver's seat. We're moving forward in 2030. Let's hear from you. Where do you see us? How do we get there?
Okay, so thanks again. I want to zoom in on our teachers. They are the lifeblood of the system. And I would want to dub our teachers development specialists. We have to prepare them and propel them to lead the charge to our development. And I believe the entire system should be behind the teaching force to ensure that those people who are on the ground with our children on a daily basis, whether it's online or it's face-to-face, that they're able to help us to get to that place, that 2030 vision that we want to achieve. So all roads, all resources behind our teachers, all the way up to 2030 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. I would love to hear from you in our next conversation, because there has to be a follow-up conversation. I'd love to hear from you, Ms. Dwyer, based on the point that Mr. Gabriel raised. You being as NEI, you have the data, you see the stats. Do you think that there'll be a difference? Should we not put the 20s and 30s in one schools and the 95 to 100 in another? What if we have all the students being placed across the island based on proximity to home or whatever? will that make a difference? But let's continue that conversation.
Yes, that's for another conversation. But, you know, I just say famously in one statement, we have good examples all around. We don't need to go anywhere for them. You should just look carefully at those that are doing well and try to see what are the things we need to take away. It's here. It's with us.
Yes.
We just need to tap into it. We find too many ways to divide ourselves.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right. So I now go over to Rosemary. I hope you're still awake, Rosemary.
Yes, I'm still awake, and I'm going to keep it very, very short. Coming from the side of the diaspora, the very first thing I want to bring a point home to is going back to identity. When we're comfortable in who we are, it builds our confidence. It makes us feel comfortable. We step out into the world and we stand very strong in who we are. Imagine that in a child. And that's why I mentioned the thing about the dialect. Just let's, you know, it's never going to be like Dr. Campbell said, it's never going to be the world language that we're communicating, but let us feel good about it from an early age, you know? And so it coexists. There's that balance, you know? English is our official language, but you know, my dialect is so much a part of me, my history, who I am. So coming from the diaspora point, coming from Germany with these ideas that I'm talking about and seeing the balance going into the vocational training, I honestly believe that we do need a second fire talk, or that we need to look at all the ideas that came up today, streamline, look at who wants to work on which team to work. Now we're connected virtually, dig a little bit deeper into those areas. For example, looking at teacher motivation or the teaching profession itself, the technical vocational, so all of these dissected, I think, Ingrid, yes, and let's work further with it, because we can do something here and we don't have all that much time. The diaspora is ready to pull our resources together. We have the networks and we can help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for staying awake, Rosemary.
Yes.
That's a big sacrifice. Thank you so very much.
Nice.
Thank you. So I now go over to Mr. Valentine. Mr. Valentine, let's hear from you, sir. Your 1 minute. I think Mr. Valentine fell asleep on us.
He did.
You're going to have to knock him up, Rosemary.
I'm still here.
There he is.
Yes, I'm still here. I'm drinking water, okay. So I won't doze off.
I thought you were gone to bed, man.
No. All right. You know, I want to say there's a quote by the Prime Minister of India. I don't remember what, but it says that the more importance you give to skill development, the more competent our young people will be. So I am a strong advocate for TVET, and I'm not advocating for TVET at the expense of general education. I am saying that there's a wide gap that exists. We tend to create these dual pathways for students. They are either on an academic trajectory or a TVET. And I'm saying to you, we need to narrow the gap. Narrow the gap in the sense that it's the TVET policy that was developed by the Technical and Vocational Unit said all students must do a TVET. But I want all my students to do a TVET, whether they are pursuing the sciences or whatever programs they are doing. But I want the TVET system to be so well equipped that the students will find a lot of pride in going to the TVET lab. I want to see the modernization of the TVET system so that it attracts the students, and not just the students who are inclined to the skills, but also the students who are inclined to pursue academic degrees and academic works. So that's the advocate that I am proposing for us to make TVET so equitable that wherever you go to a school, when you go to an industrial labs at this traditional school as opposed to this, you should see some 18th century equipment at one and see more modernization at the other. I want to see more equity. I want to see the TVET being held in that content that it attracts the brightest set of students. And this can only be done if we ensure that the resources are put in the schools, equity is there in terms of placement and resources to ensure that the TVET labs are fully equipped. And part of this process is to do, I mean, government finances will not be able to suffice, but we need to have public-private partnership. The companies, the businesses can't believe that the contribution that they make to our trust, they play in their own role in social development. We need to convince them that they need to partner with schools, individual schools in their own geographical location, and help to build out some of these lab facilities. That's what I'm advocating for. And when we do that, we'll develop our skills and our students will become more competent, and Jamaica will prosper and become the goals that we set for 2030 and beyond will be more sustainable. That's my piece.
Thank you so much, Mr. Valentine. Thanks for staying awake. All right. And so I now go over to Mr. Sutherland. Mr. Sutherland, your 1 minute. You have been such a superb panelist. Go ahead, Mr. Sutherland. Is it Mr. Sutherland who fell asleep on us? Somebody needs to knock on Mr. Sutherland's door. Knock, knock, Mr. Sutherland. We're still here. All right. Not hearing from Mr. Sutherland, but I want to know, wrap up, and I want to say,
Ingrid,
yes.
Perhaps you might like to, you may want to tell the audience that Mr. Michael Sutherland is a principal because they've been lobbying for a principal to be on. But Michael is a principal and so is Jasper. Yeah.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. I appreciate that. So Mr. Sutherland, yes, is a principal. He is represented here, representing the principals here. So the voice of a principal, Mr. Gabriel is in a different seat tonight. And remember that we all are looking at Jamaica. We're looking at, you know, where we're coming from, where we are, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. We definitely will be having another fireside conversation. This one has been so rich, too rich to be contained in one sitting. We've been here for all 2.5 hours. Wow. And I want to thank the teachers, the viewers. Thank you so very much for staying with us. I just have so much to walk away with. I want to ask Alison though, is there anything, Alison, out based on the chat or streaming from Facebook, YouTube, that you want to share with us as we wrap up? Is there any burning issue there that we need to address? Go ahead.
Actually, there's been so much on the chat, both on the YouTube page and in the conversation here. But just to mention one thing is that somebody had said something about the arts and that whole Jamaican art creativity, not tapping into that and not expanding on that. And sometimes people see it as a side thing. I saw that coming up in the chat. That's a whole nother fireside conversation. I'm loving it. Right? So much to talk about, right? And so, just wanted to mention that and thank persons for coming and making their comments, because both the panelists and the comments from persons just watching was just awesome, especially on a Saturday night at this time. Real nice fireside chat.
Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, panelists, viewers, I really do appreciate you being here with us. Stay tuned, we will keep you informed because we're definitely coming back with part 2 of our fireside conversation. I think it's time for you, Rosemary, to go to bed. It's almost morning for you in Germany. Right across, we're so very grateful.
Dr. She shouldn't be going to bed. She should be waking up now.
That's right, 4:33. I have to go take my walk in an hour.
She looks doesn't she have somewhere to go later in the day?
She's always
Sunday. I'll go to church and then that's it.
So you should be waking up now.
All right. So ladies and gentlemen, I really do appreciate the time taken this evening to be with us for a fireside conversation. We look forward to part 2 as we're going to now be looking at some of the points that came up here. We definitely will be looking at the diaspora, that group, to see, how do you fit into all of this and how can we move forward? Great conversation, great people. Could ask for a better audience. Thank you so very much. Have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful rest of the night.
Thank you, Miss Wilmot, for being such a great chair.
Oh,
you know,
Thank you, chair. Thank you. You've been a great chair.
Moderator,
and
not
it's
chair.
been so great because I did not give my early childhood. Mrs. Seymour Hall, do give me your last minute. How could I have not been so great?
Yes, I want to hear from her.
Go ahead, Mrs. Seymour Hall.
So I'm going to complain and say that you've forgotten early childhood, and we can't forget early childhood.
No, not after I dug you out and called and say you have to be on. No, I do apologize.
Right.
Go ahead.
But just to say, we've accomplished a lot, because in terms of our whole assessment framework, for instance, we have our own ASQJ, Ages and Stages questionnaire, that's customized for Jamaica. We have acts and regulations, we have standards and all of that have been developed. And we see other countries that you would regard as being first world and so on, looking at some of the best practices in Jamaica. And so we've made our mark on the world, but we still have a lot to do in terms of teacher quality, in terms of revisiting our psychosocial conditioning as it relates to how we see students and how we see the profession. So there is still a lot of work to be done, and we have to do it in the context of understanding that most of our brain development will occur by age 5, just about 4/5. And so we have to ensure that our children are getting the right foundation and they are being taught the proper values and attitude. Every teacher should have a proper knowledge of history, a proper knowledge of political science, a proper knowledge of what it means to be Jamaican, and not just how to teach generally, but how to teach our Jamaican children and how to basically change the way we see ourselves and our place in the world. And that's in instances where we have negative opinions, because of course there's a side of Jamaicans that's just awesome. We see ourselves as the best, and we need to tap into those positive we have and build on them. So in other areas we can be so much more and do so much better. Thank you
so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Wonderful night, wonderful conversation. We look forward to having part 2 very soon. Remember now, Dorothy Campbell is supposed to be sending to us via, is it Knutsford? I'm not sure if it's going to get to you in Germany, but we'll be getting her a bottle of wine for our next fireside session. Have yourselves a wonderful night. Thank you. It was just awesome being here.
I drink fine wines, Miss Campbell.
Look forward to that.
I'm not hearing, you're breaking up.
I drink fine wines.
I didn't hear. I think you broke up, right? You broke up.
You didn't hear.
Miss Wilmot and Dr. Gordon, I just want to say that, Mrs. Dwyer said something that I think is very important, that there's just too many things that divide us. I think we really need to come together more often like this, and really unearth the issues with little regard to the positions we hold, because sometimes the positions encumber us, so we really need to come together a little bit more so that we can really make the change. That's good.
You'll be invited. Look out for your invitation. It's coming with a bottle of wine. Thank you so very much. And I think it's time for us to send Rosemary to bed. Have yourself a wonderful night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
you. Keep safe, you guys.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Night-night.